I found out my house had been stolen the same way most people find out their flight's been delayed, standing there tired, confused, staring at something that made no damn sense. I got back from a 6-month deployment, dragged my suitcase up the walkway, slid my key into the lock, and it just stopped. Wouldn't turn. Wouldn't even pretend. Then I looked through my own front window and saw strangers unpacking dishes in my kitchen. That's the kind of moment that makes your brain go quiet. Not loud quiet. Like your mind knows that if it starts screaming, you might break. I'm Michael, and before all this happened, I thought I had done everything right. I served my country, saved my money, bought a home in a neighborhood that looked like one of those brochures people leave in real estate offices. Big trees, trimmed lawns, sidewalks curved just enough to feel expensive, neighbors waving like they all belonged to the same church picnic. After years of moving around, I wanted peace. Nothing flashy, just a place that was mine. And for a minute, I thought I had it. The house sat on the best lot in the cul-de-sac, especially at sunset. You could stand on the back patio with a glass of iced tea and watch the sky go orange, then pink, then that deep bruised purple right before dark. I loved that view. I loved the quiet. I loved the feeling of finally putting my boots by the same front door every night. But there was one problem, and her name was Karen. You know the type. Even before she opens her mouth perfectly. Sprayed hair, permanent smile that never reaches the eyes, clipboard energy in human form. She was the president of the HOA, which in her mind made her somewhere between a mayor, a judge, and God's regional manager. From the day I moved in, she found reasons to be in my business. My grass was a 1/4 inch too high. My trash can had been visible from the street for an extra hour. My Christmas lights were aesthetic non-compliant, which I'm still pretty sure is not a real sentence. One time she complained about my welcome mat. My welcome mat. Apparently welcome was fine, but the color was aggressive. I wish I were kidding. Now I'm a calm man by nature. Army taught me discipline, life taught me patience, and being the only black man on that cul-de-sac taught me something else. Sometimes people are just waiting for a reason. I wasn't about to hand anybody one. So I smiled, nodded, fixed what didn't need fixing, and kept my head down. I told myself she was just one of those petty little tyrants who needed rules the way other people need oxygen. But looking back, I can tell you plain the rules were never the point. I was. A few years after I moved in, I got called back for a 6-month overseas consulting deployment. Nothing dramatic but important work, and I was proud to do it. Before I left, I handled everything. I notified the HOA. I gave them my email, my phone number, my emergency contact. I hired a landscaping company to come by twice a week. I checked my autopay accounts, made copies of every document, locked the house up tight. I covered every base I knew to cover. I thought I was leaving my home protected. What I was really doing was handing Karen an empty stage. The second my plane took off, that woman got to work like she'd been waiting for the starter pistol. She started filing complaints against my property, fake ones, ridiculous ones, nonstop. She claimed my lawn was overgrown, even though the crew came twice a week. She reported my fence as unsafe, even though it had been replaced less than a year earlier. She stacked violation on top of violation, each one carrying a fine, each fine feeding a paper trail that made it look like I'd abandoned the place. And here's the part that still makes my stomach turn every notice went to the house, my empty house. So while I was overseas doing my job, envelopes were piling up behind my front door like dry leaves in a corner. Late notices, violation letters, hearing notices, all of it building the story Karen wanted everybody else to believe. Not that Michael was deployed, not that Michael was responsible, no. That Michael was negligent, unreachable delinquent. Then she pulled in her next accomplice, some slick little lawyer who apparently made a living crawling around loopholes in property law like a raccoon in a dumpster. Together, they twisted HOA bylaws, pushed fake fines, forged or manipulated paperwork, and started foreclosure proceedings on my house. My house. The one I bought. The one I paid for. The one with my father's watch in the bedroom drawer and my medals boxed in the study closet. Since I wasn't there to respond and because Karen basically ran the HOA board like her own private dictatorship, nobody stopped it. No one asked the obvious question. No one checked where I was. No one thought maybe the guy who always kept his place neat and paid his dues on time had not suddenly decided to disappear into the wind. They pushed it through a quiet foreclosure auction, the kind nobody notices until it's too late. And the only bidder, imagine my shock, was a shell company secretly tied to Karen. She bought my home for a fraction of what it was worth, then stood there in her pressed slacks and little pearls like she'd accomplished something respectable. That should have been the end of the crime. It wasn't. Once the deed was in her name, she sent in a clean-out crew. Not movers clean-out people. The kind who walk through a life with contractor bags and dead eyes. They tossed out furniture, family photos, framed certificates, old letters, kitchenware, clothes, everything. Some things got sold. Most of it got dumped. My military memorabilia gone. My father's watch gone. The quilt my mother gave me before she passed gone. You ever have somebody try to erase you? That's what it felt like. Not theft, erasure. Then Karen relisted the house at full market value and sold it to a young family who had absolutely no idea what had happened. They were innocent, just excited. New beginning, first home, little kid, little bicycle hopes and plans and moving boxes. Meanwhile, Karen pocketed the profit and probably slept like a baby. 6 months later, I landed home thinking about a hot shower, clean sheets, and the pleasure of not hearing an airport announcement for at least a week. I took a cab from the airport. I remember the light that evening, soft gold end of summer heat hanging in the air. My neighborhood looking exactly the same and completely different all at once. Then I saw the car in my driveway. Then the bicycle. Then the curtains I'd never seen before. I stood there on my own porch with my suitcase in one hand and my house key in the other, feeling like the world had tilted just enough to throw me off balance. I tried the key anyway. Didn't work. I knocked. A man I'd never met opened the door holding a dish towel, looking at me like I was the confused one. "Can I help you?" I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your body does weird things when your soul gets punched. "I live here," I said. He looked me up and down, then over his shoulder, then back at me. His wife came into the hallway. I could hear a child somewhere in the back of the house. And when I said my name, when I told them I owned this place, I watched the color drain out of both their faces. They showed me paperwork, a deed, closing documents, Karen's name, sale records. Everything looked official, clean, stamped, legal. That was the worst part, evil with good formatting. Now I could have lost it right there. Could have yelled, called the cops, pounded on doors, made a scene big enough for the whole cul-de-sac to enjoy from behind their blinds. But panic doesn't help you think, and training has a way of kicking in when your emotions want to drive. So I took a breath, told that family they weren't the enemy, apologized for frightening them, and stepped off the porch. My first call wasn't to Karen. It was to Sarah. Sarah was my attorney, and when I say she was sharp, I mean the woman could cut glass with one sentence. No nonsense, no wasted words, no patience for bullies and pearls. I told her what happened standing under my own oak tree while somebody else's groceries sat in my kitchen. There was a pause on the line. Then she said very calmly, "Michael, do not call Karen. Do not talk to the board. Go get a hotel room. I'm about to ruin this woman's week." That was the twist Karen never saw coming. See, Karen thought she was playing a neighborhood game. Fake fines, HOA, nonsense paperwork, tricks, enough confusion to bury the truth. What she forgot or ignored was that I had been deployed. And under federal law, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, you do not foreclose on an active duty service member without a court order. Period. No clever bylaw, no shady attorney, no HOA queen on a power trip gets to step around that. This wasn't just ugly. It was federal. 10 minutes after that call, Sarah started dropping matches into dry grass. She sent a cease and desist letter so brutal I wish I had framed it. It went to Karen, her lawyer, the title company, the real estate agent, and every member of the HOA board. It laid everything out: the deployment, the legal protections, the invalid foreclosure, the exposure to federal penalties, civil damages, fraud claims, the whole ugly symphony. And just like that, Karen's little kingdom started catching fire. The title company opened an internal investigation. The real estate agent started scrambling because nobody wants their name tied to a fraudulent military foreclosure. The HOA board members, who had happily nodded along while Karen ran the show, suddenly discovered the ancient human art of self-preservation. Phones started ringing. Emails started flying. People who had ignored me for years suddenly cared a whole lot about procedure. Karen, from what I heard later, called her lawyer in a full panic. Problem was, he was already trying to back away from her like a man who smelled smoke under a door. The legal fight that followed was fast, mean, and beautiful. Once the evidence hit daylight, the court moved quickly. The foreclosure was voided. The sale was voided. The deed was restored to me. The family in the house had to move, and I hated that for them. I truly did. They were victims too. But the court made it clear a stolen house does not become unstolen just because somebody bought it in good faith. Then came the part Karen really deserved. I sued her, personally, fraud, conversion, emotional distress, destruction of property, the works. And because her actions were malicious, deliberate, and tied to a violation involving a deployed service member. The damage award was not small. She was ordered to cover my legal fees, repay the value of what was lost, and pay punitive damages on top of that. Last I heard, she had to sell her own home to come up with the money. Poetry has many forms. Sometimes it's a court order. But the part I didn't expect, the part that hit hardest, was what happened in the neighborhood. Once the truth came out, the same people who had smiled politely and stayed quiet suddenly found their voices. There was an emergency HOA meeting. Karen got voted out unanimously. Unanimously. The woman who had strutted around that cul-de-sac like a crown was welded to her skull, got thrown out by the very people she thought she controlled. After that, she became what people like her fear most: irrelevant. The young family apologized to me over and over like any of this was their fault. I told them the truth. They'd been lied to just like everybody else. I even helped them connect with a realtor in a nearby neighborhood. It felt like the right thing to do. Bitterness can make you feel powerful for a minute, but it poisons the wrong person if you let it sit too long. Eventually, I got back into my house. It was empty. No couch, no dishes, no framed photos, no watch, no quilt, no little ordinary things that make a place feel like your life happened there. Just bare floors, echoing rooms, and that strange smell. Empty houses have dust, paint, silence. I stood in the living room at sunset looking at the same orange light I used to love, and I realized something that hit deeper than anger. A home is wood and drywall until memory moves in. And memory is fragile. That whole mess taught me something ugly about power. A lot of small tyrants don't want rules, because rules make life orderly. They want rules because rules give cowards a costume. Put the wrong person in a position with a clipboard, a title, and an audience, and they'll start confusing control with virtue. Karen thought she was untouchable because people were used to her being loud. But loud isn't the same thing as right, and paperwork isn't the same thing as justice. Sometimes evil looks official. That's the part people miss. I rebuilt room by room, piece by piece. Some neighbors helped. Real neighbors. The kind who showed up with folding chairs, casserole dishes, and a quiet kind of respect. The kind who didn't need a badge from the HOA to know what decency looks like. My house became mine again slowly. Not the same, never the same, but mine. Karen lost her title, her money, her reputation, her house, and whatever was left of her mask. And me, I got something better than revenge. I got the truth on paper. I got my name back where it belonged. I got to watch the woman who tried to erase me get remembered for exactly what she was. So here's what I want to ask you: when somebody uses rules, titles, or the law itself to bully people, where do you think the line is between justice and revenge when it finally comes back on them? And if you've ever dealt with a Karen at work, in your neighborhood, or anywhere power got weaponized, tell me what happened, because sometimes the wildest part isn't the cruelty. It's how long people get away with it before somebody finally says enough.